Hey there, welcome into another episode of Anchor Points. My name is Pastor Tucker Parman, and one of the things that we try to do here at Anchor Points is talk about topics at the intersection of faith and practice. In other words, we're interested in having conversation about deep issues of our faith, but doing so in a way that's practical, right? That's not lofty or really heady, but that answers the question, so what? There are a lot of topics in our faith that I think fit into this category, and we're excited to talk about one here today. And joining me for this episode of Anchor Points is my wife, Jenna Parman.
Yes.
How exciting.
Hi.
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 Hey. So for those of you who don't know Jenna, she's amazing and you should get to know her. But we'll ask one brief question here just to allow the people to get to know you a little bit better. Who is better at pickleball, you or me?
You are.
Right. That's
too easy.
Yeah, no, that's not the question. Tell us a little bit about your educational background. What did you study? Those sort of things.
Yep. So I came up here in 2013 to U of M to play soccer and attend college. But I studied psychology and then I minored in communication. After that, I did a semester at U of M for counseling. Decided to go a different route and got my master's from Liberty University in pastoral counseling.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that is the topic for today, is counseling. There's obviously a lot of, I think, opinion and thoughts about there in terms of what counseling is and what it isn't, and is it beneficial, is it not? So what we want to do again in these videos is just kind of talk about it from that 10,000 foot level. So Jenna, to start out asking the question, what is counseling? If we had to answer that question as broad as it is, how would you respond?
Yeah, especially nowadays, that's a very broad term. Depending on who you ask, they're going to have different perspectives on what it is, but for the sake of faith and practice, from a biblical perspective, I would say good counsel is going to look like, imparting wisdom, comforting someone through a difficult time, encouraging them, exhorting them, maybe even rebuking them to an extent, calling them deeper into who God's called them to be. Yeah, that's just, again, from a biblical perspective. There is a word that during my studying I just became really drawn to, and it's a Greek word found largely in the New Testament, and it's parakaleo. And it, again, just means the things that I just shared of encouraging, comforting, and it's largely used in how we can love one another, how we can be the church to one another. And interestingly, the Holy Spirit is referred to as paraclete, which largely just means the helper. Very similar Greek word to parakaleo. So I just found that interesting.
Yeah. Again,
that's just a broad definition of what counseling looks like.
Yeah, so great. We have some biblical basis for what counseling is. It looks like, I think what you said, that one thing I certainly noticed is you have to be in relationship, right? There has to be someone across from you in terms for counseling to take place, to be encouraged by, to be exhorted by, to be challenged and drawn deeper. So not to move away from the biblical perspective, but when we talk about counseling in general, what would you say that looks like? We've laid a solid, brief foundation of biblical counseling. Now, what would counseling look like maybe to the average person?
Yep, it's going to look like attending an 30-minute to an hour-and-a-half session where one person who largely typically is going to be trained in a specific area of counseling. Again, there's a ton of different perspectives that you can be trained in, but largely they will sit there, listen to you, build a relationship with you, and try to help you grow. I would say is a pretty general way of describing that.
That's great. That's so. What I'm also hearing you say is, so you're telling me I'm not going to look at a bunch of ink blots?
Correct.
Okay.
So I think largely some people might think of, the Freudian perspective where you're laying on that couch bed thing and they're interpreting your dreams into this like really hidden underlying message, but it's a lot less complicated than that. There is psychotherapists out there, but it also can look like you sitting across from someone at a coffee shop. I think we counsel one another like every day. And so it can be as official and professional as, in a counseling office to sitting across from someone, a friend who's going through a difficult time.
Yeah, one of the things, just in doing a little bit of prep work for this conversation on counseling that I really appreciated, and if I could give a one sentence, a two sentence biblical definition, it'd be found in Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5. And it tells us that the purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insights draws them out, right? And I think that's exactly what you were just talking about, that when we think of counseling, often it's this, I have to share my feelings, and there's these hidden motives and agendas, and there are arenas or environments where that could model what counseling looks like.
Right.
But I know in my experience, both in doing some pastoral counseling and in receiving some more professional counseling, often it's just hey, I've noticed something about how maybe I respond or how something impacted me in my life, and I'm coming to you to help draw that out of me. I don't know how to make sense of it. I don't know kind of where to go with this, and I need some help. And I know I've shared some of this testimony from the pulpit, and obviously you know a lot about my story as well, but as a young kid being sexually abused, I needed help in terms of what that looks like to process that, and how do I make sense of that. And there were such incredibly gentle and tender people who, it wasn't weird, it was emotional, because man, that was a huge traumatic event for me, but it was one that was just it was so, I wish comforting, I guess would be a word to just describe it. So kind of answering the question of what is counseling, and in closing here, who is counseling for when we talk about that? Who is counseling for?
Yeah, everyone. I mean, more specifically, there's going to be more of a crisis situation.
Sure.
So if you're going through grief, death of a family member, or as simple as the loss of your job, that can require some assistance. Or maybe you've uncovered that you have some trauma in your past, similar to your story, or just some habitual things that have been causing issues in your relationships that can be very distressing. But even if you just want to grow more into the image of Christ, would recommend seeking a counselor, whether that be professionally or just a trained, wise old person within the church, whatever that looks like, whatever God's calling you to do, would encourage you to pursue that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love your emphasis on the notion of growth. I think that's so key, and again, absolutely, counseling in crisis moments is necessary and beneficial, and I love just for the average everyday, maybe I don't find myself in a crisis, counseling's still incredibly beneficial, and it still can produce really, really awesome fruit. So how we end all of these is, again, we've maybe had a 10-minute conversation here on what counseling is and kind of who it's for, and what we like to do is answer the question, so what? Okay, we've had this discussion about what something is and maybe how we engage in it, but so what? What is the benefit of counseling, or why might someone take that step and say, you know what, I'm going to take a step of faith here and I'm going to receive counseling, whether it's pastorally from someone on the church staff, whether it's, like you said, a mentor or someone within the church, or whether it's in the professional realm. So what? Why would we pursue counseling?
I think it overlaps so much with discipleship. And so I would advise, if you're not seeking out wise counsel, you're receiving it elsewhere. You're receiving it all the time.
That's so good.
And so important to protect your heart and everything from just poor counsel in your life. And especially at pivotal moments of, am I hearing the Lord's voice correctly? It can just honestly change your life. And like I said, you are counseling people all the time. So I think another so what is, how can I become a better counselor?
Wow, that's good.
How can I grow in my faith so that I can impart good wisdom? How I can properly comfort someone through a challenging time and encourage them when they're weak. I think it just has infinite implications. But you're doing it and you're receiving it. So why not grow in it? And it glorifies God. I think when you're able to carry someone through one of the most challenging things, you're able to act as the hands of God, and the Holy Spirit can work through you. So just encourage you to, if you want to learn more about it, talk to Tucker and I, but there's a ton of resources as well, so would love to direct you to those.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love your point earlier as well about, it's just discipleship. It's part of the process of growing. Kyle mentioned the word on Sunday, the sanctification word, right? Growing more and more into the image of Jesus, and counseling can be an incredible way that takes place. It's very practical. So thanks so much for joining us here on another episode of Anchor Points. If you're interested in learning more about counseling, we have some counseling resources here at Anchor Church, and we would love to share them with you. You can reach us at info@goanchorchurch.com, or you can shoot us a DM here on Instagram. We hope that this content blessed you today, and we are excited for the next episode of Anchor Points.